Welcome to the Love of the Star podcast. I am Bobby Belt, Dallas Cowboys insider for 105.3 The Fan in Dallas. That is your radio flagship home of the Dallas Cowboys. Joined as always by former Super Bowl winning NFL scout Brian Broaddus. He is now the co-host of the G-Bag Nation, 2 to 7 p.m. Central, Monday through Friday on 105.3 The Fan in Dallas. He's also the pre- and post-game co-host on the Dallas Cowboys radio network. And he is also the co-host of the Draft Show. And it is Draft week. It is football Christmas or football off-season Christmas. Brian Broaddus, how excited are you to finally be just days away from the NFL draft now?
Man, always excited about the NFL draft. And I want to make sure you get your proper introduction. Bobby Belt of 105.3, the fan of the Sean and RJ and Bobby show, 5:30 to 10, Monday through Friday. And also the Cowboys insider for 105.3, the fan. Also a co-host of the Draft Show and the big time here to the Love of the Star. So yes, Bobby, I'm very excited. I've been doing this since 1992. I was a part of a draft in 1992 that actually went 12 rounds. That was the last time that we had that soiree into a 12-round draft, and it was a lot of fun. It was very exhausting, but I've kind of looked at things. I think the hay's in the barn right now. We're starting to see boards put up. I know from a lot of media scouts, rankings are going up. I'm excited to put mine up on 105.3 The Fan. Hey, I did the work. You might as well see what I see. And if you like it, great. If you don't, I challenge you to do the same. So, looking forward to it, Bobby. I mean, the thing about with the Cowboys talking today at this press conference.
Yep.
And one of the most important things that Stephen Jones said, but there's a lot of things. I think there's other things we need to get to, but I'm going to focus on this one real quick. The thing that Stephen Jones said about really not knowing where the direction is going to happen or what's going to happen until the draft actually starts. You don't know if you're going to go up. You don't know if you're going to go back. You don't know if you're going to stay until those picks start coming off the board. And then once those players one by one get eliminated off your stack, that tells you to go draft CeeDee Lamb. That's the things that you do. That tells you to go draft Zach Martin, So I think the Cowboys at 26 is a position they're very familiar with. They've got a division opponent ahead of them, so they can kind of get an idea what they're doing as well. Philadelphia will be down there too at the bottom once they get past pick 10. So you're going to have everybody, with the exception, really, like I say, the Commanders are like in the middle of that board, but you're going to be able to find out what your division opponents are going to be doing around you this coming weekend.
Yeah, and I think it's a good point to bring up that, Stephen talked about, hey, you don't really know what you're going to do until, picks start coming off the board. But one thing that was interesting was the fact that Jerry Jones seemed really eager to tell everybody, hey, we don't know.
Opened the press conference? Yeah,
we don't know what we're going to do until the picks start flying off the board. But it almost sounded like Jerry was saying, we're going somewhere. I don't know which direction we're going. I don't know if we're going up or we're going down, but we are going somewhere, because he was all too eager to go ahead and volunteer in this one, that his mind is on a trade. David Moore from the Dallas Morning News asked a question to lead things off, and Jerry actually said, hey, before we answer that, let me tell you, I'm thinking about trades right now. Now, I'm curious, is that Jerry just being his normal forthcoming self, or is that Jerry trying to maybe stir some things up and create some doubt?
I think Jerry is looking for a player. And I think that, and he used the word warts. And so if you're a Cowboy fan out there and you're thinking, okay, what are the players that potentially have warts? And I mean, warts, it's not always like the character issue guys and stuff like that. Maybe with what we've seen with Carter. But what about a Peter Skoronski, that has short arms? Is that a wart? You got to think about it as a big picture way of like what players are ahead of Dallas, or Dallas looking at, and that in the top. They said they have between 15 and 18 names on their board. I think they're probably on the high end of that. Maybe in that 17 to 18 range. So, what players are potentially could fall to them that they would be comfortable with maybe going up for, or sitting there and just waiting to see if that particular player comes to them at 26. I think a thing they have to be really mindful of, Bobby, and this is something I did as a pro personnel director there, is that you have to know exactly what the teams ahead of you and the teams behind you are looking at. And you've got some super aggressive teams if you're the Cowboys. And I think the Cowboys are being really careful not to telegraph the pick. We've seen them, everybody's put guards there. People have put tight ends there. They've put running backs there. They've put linebackers there. I mean, that's the big unknown right now. But if you're sitting on a particular player, and I think the Cowboys have done a really good job of not really letting anybody know what direction that they're going to go, because that behind you, you got to worry about the Saints going up. You got to worry about the Eagles potentially going up. You got to worry about the Kansas City Chiefs going up, especially if it's a player that you kind of covet. Would you be surprised if Philadelphia doesn't take the runner at 10, but waits to see it get down if it gets into range, if Bijan Robinson gets into range and makes a small move up and grabs Bijan Robinson? Because I think Bijan Robinson is a guy the Cowboys would absolutely take if he was on the board.
Yeah, absolutely.
So now you have to worry about, is there a team behind you that sees a Bijan Robinson close enough to where they didn't think they were going to get him? Now he's close enough to where you make a small move. That's where I think the Cowboys have to be very mindful, because somebody could trade ahead of you. Well, you and I, we could be on the clock or getting ready to go on the clock. And the next thing you know, it's like, all right, Dallas is about to be on the clock. Oh my, this pick just went to New Orleans. Oh my, this pick just went to Kansas City. Oh my, this pick just went to Philadelphia. They're trading ahead of you. Are they going to grab the last tight end? Are they going to grab potentially the last first round tight end? Are they going to grab the runner? Is there one of these corners sliding? We talked about with Porter. That's Peter King and mock draft. He put Porter to the Cowboys. You and I talked about it on our show that we did on Sunday about, wow, Porter got to us. How'd that happen? Gosh, you got to turn that card in, don't you? So, yeah. I think the Cowboys have got to be alert for a lot of things. Yeah, it's real easy to stand there and make that pick, but it's also really easy to say, okay, do we want to flip a pick and try and go up a little bit and make sure we get the guy we want? That's where I think if teams behind them are going to be aggressive, you got to also feel like that you probably need to be a little bit more aggressive if somebody's sliding down the board that Jerry Jones talking about that has a few warts on him.
Yeah, look, and he talked about, their trade value points and collecting more points. And so the question then becomes, all right, you could mean a couple different things there. You could mean, let's go collect more points by going back and picking up extra capital. You could mean, let's go pick up more points by having a higher value point in the first round and go up a little bit in a draft that everybody seems to agree, just like last year, is not very top heavy. I think it's a little better than last year. And Stephen Jones said today they would have 15 to 17, maybe 18 first round grades.
Yeah.
And so that's better than last year where I think they had 14.
Yeah, I think when he showed the board by accident, I think he had 15 names. Didn't he, when he showed
close.
the board?
Yeah. And so it'll be interesting there. But when you talk about warts, I'm going to run through some player names for you, Brian. And these are guys that I think largely you wouldn't expect would necessarily slide into Dallas's range.
But they've got warts. It's a short arm guy.
And it's four different types of warts for you, okay?
Go ahead. All right, go.
4 players, 4 different types of warts. Let's go with the first one. Jackson Smith and Jigba. His warts, obviously, the injury history.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Is that a guy that if he started sliding down, you think they go, that's a more talented player than we should, like that's not a player we should just let slip by. If he gets into the late teens, would you say, well, we can't let the Giants get him or go up and get it? We like this guy. Let's go up and get him and take the warts that come with him, which are the injuries.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right about that, man. And how about this? How about just receiver in general? I mean, we don't know. Like I said, what's the warts? What's the warts of our USC guy? The lack of bulk,
size, and testing. The testing was not great.
Yeah. See, I don't see, and maybe you're hearing different than me, Bobby. I don't see Quentin Johnston as a guy. I mean, they talked about TCU. But you keep hearing a little bit of this, a little bit. Maybe Quentin Johnston wouldn't be the 26, maybe with the whole thing with Smith and Jigba, I think you're absolutely right about that. I think that when you really, really start to break these things down, is that the thing, Addison, Smith and Jigba, where are we? Like I say, one lacks bulk, Addison at 173 pounds. And then you mentioned Smith and Jigba, who might have a little bit of injury history to him.
And then the next player with some warts, the second of the four, Bijan Robinson, which his warts are just flat out his positional value.
Positional value, right.
And the Cowboys talked about this today, that they essentially acknowledged Zeke at 4 is an overpay in this day and age, in this NFL, and that they wouldn't necessarily want to take somebody that high. But if you look at the talent and the point where they start sliding to a certain point, the Cowboys go, well, now this is just ridiculous value, and we need to go there. I still don't think they would trade up for Bijan Robinson. I think they'd kind of let things fall.
Yeah, I do too.
Could that be one of the guys that they're referencing, or one of the types of warts they're referencing?
Yeah, okay. And I put Dave Brugler's top 300 next to mine. And so I'm looking at like where he had guys. And on my board, I got Bijan Robinson as the third best player. On Dave Brugler's board, he's the sixth best player. Okay. So now all of a sudden we're getting down to 26. I am sure there is a lot. And this is where I worry. Because I think if he gets down to 26 or near 26, I worry about somebody jumping the Cowboys. Like, you could sweat this thing the whole time and go, oh, you've walked the minefields. You've got through all teams. And now he's down in that range where it's at 22, 23, 24, somewhere right around there. And all of a sudden, maybe the Giants are the team that gives up, ahead of the Cap. The Giants don't have any need for a running back. Maybe they feel like they could get the wide receiver if they move back 2 or 3 spots and, and pick something up. So I would worry, if you're a Cowboy fan and you think you're going to get Bijan Robinson, I would worry about maybe one of those teams, maybe another team coming up, because they see the value at 26 or at 25 to get a player that's probably the third or the sixth or maybe the 8th best player on their board.
The other name, and I'm going to preface this with a little bit of a news nugget from today when we record this here on Monday. I think all along we've all agreed, for the most part, that we believe Peter Skoronski will be the first offensive lineman off the board. It has been the general thought, regardless of if you thought he was a guard or a tackler or whatever else.
Man, well, Paris Johnson, right?
Well, I was about to say, the betting odds flipped on Monday to the number 3 overall pick, the favorite for the Cardinals to take is offensive lineman. And then the reports came out Monday from Mike Garafolo that Kyler Murray has told the Cardinals he loves Paris Johnson and would be a big fan of him being picked by the Cardinals in the first round. So if Paris Johnson goes first and this offensive line class isn't viewed exactly the way we think, does that mean that potentially you've got a player like Peter Skoronski with his lack of length sliding down the board a little bit into a range where the Cowboys would say that's a guy we need to go up and get, even with his warts?
Yeah, that's the short arms. That's the absolute. To me, there's a couple of guys like Skoronski, Carter. I mean, if you get to a point where it's a doable thing, where you get them into that 18, 19, 20 range, you got to think about maybe what's it going to take. What's it going to take? You go up there, you get Peter Skoronski, you fix the left guard spot. You've absolutely fixed the left guard spot. So yeah, I think we're onto something, because again, I'm only taking what Jerry's saying. I don't think warts are all about off the field stuff. I think the warts have something to do with physical limitations or body types. I just think that's where the Cowboys are at. The reason they would go up is for one of those types of guys that you just mentioned.
And when we talked about all these other different types of warts here. You had position, you had injuries, You had measurables. The only other wart left to talk about, obviously, is off the field. And who personifies that more than Jalen Carter, the defensive tackle from Georgia? If Jalen Carter gets to 10, 11, 12, is that the type of player the Cowboys could say, you know what? This is a guy who should have gone in the top 3. We need to go up there.
Yeah, I think that would be a super aggressive move if, because again, Jalen Carter visited every team in the top 10, I believe. I think he made every, and I told, I don't know if you were on the draft show with us, but maybe we talked about this. I'm sorry. You and I are on so many platforms doing other things, but the thing about Jalen Carter, if I was a team that was in the top 10, I would have absolutely had my security team in Athens, Georgia, trying to figure things out. I would have been there for a week. I'd been talking to people. I would have been trailing him. I would have got every little bit of information you can. Now, maybe the kid's not in Athens, Georgia anymore, but I would have figured out, I would have had my team down there and I would have turned over every rock and tried to figure this thing out because, I don't see him getting out of the top 10, but if he does, I think if you're a team, you have to be ready. If you're the Cowboys, maybe you do call up there 11, 12, 13. Now the Packers now hold, pick 13, so maybe you're in a situation where, you try and trade that off. And if Jalen Carter's there, you make a run at it, but I think you have to be ready for all those different scenarios.
You are listening to the Love of the Star podcast. The Love of the Star is an Audacy podcast. You can find it on the Audacy app or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Brian. So it is draft week. We are getting closer. We just sat here discussing a lot of the things that Steven, Jerry, and Mike McCarthy discussed at their press conference on Monday ahead of the draft. A lot of teams spoke on Monday, actually, with local media and gave some insight into where things are going. So as we head into this week,
did most teams lead their drafts talking about trading? Is that? I know we just did a whole segment about, but that's Jerry Jones. But go ahead there. I'm sorry. It's just
I don't think
he immediately opened about trading, and So we'll see.
I don't think that was at all what other teams led. In fact, other teams were trying to lead with, we're not trading anybody. Like San Francisco trying to tell you, we're not trading Trey Lance, and Tennessee saying, we haven't gotten any calls on Derrick Henry. What are you talking about? So they're all doing the opposite. They're trying to say, we're not looking to trade, and Jerry's going, oh yeah, come on, let's go. But with these other teams talking and us starting to get a sense of things like, maybe Paris Johnson could go third. Maybe there isn't a quarterback taken at number 2. And if there is one, maybe it is Will Levis as the second quarterback off the board. Peter King saying on Monday that CJ Stroud could fall out of the top 7. It's
that S2 thing, man.
But here's the thing. I think there's a little, I think this is lying season with CJ Stroud.
I don't disagree with you.
But that I think the free fall chatter that's all been stirred, I think that's teams trying to get him to slide. I don't think he's falling that far.
Well, okay, let's be honest. There's a reason that, at Houston at 2. At 2. Okay. They're and I've talked to people around the league about this. They're a big S2 team. This is why we're not hearing quarterback at Houston at 2. They're a big S2 team, and they're sitting there looking at it, and, they're kind of thinking, well, do we really want to take a quarterback? And you're right. Stroud's score was not in the right percentile. Why is Houston so big S2? They're big S2 because they got a new coach from San Francisco, the coordinators from San Francisco. They believe in that test. Now, we'll see if the general manager is going to allow the coaches to run this draft and, hey, we really don't like Stroud because he's not in the right percentile for us, where, you should hand that card in and go, just hand it in and go, but they're not, they really do believe in that test. And there's might be some other teams up there that are the same way. That's why you're hearing names like Richardson and Levis and people like that. Richardson scored right on the cusp of that 80 percentile where Levis was well inside of that number. Bryce Young was well inside of that number, the highest of the numbers. So, you're talking about guys like Hendon Hooker. The Hendon Hooker hype has kind of quieted down a little bit. Now we'll see, but him and Stroud kind of finished in the same group in that percentile, and those teams that really believe in it, maybe they're now kind of saying, well, we believe in it so much, we're gonna pass on these guys.
Yeah, and I not to say that there aren't 2 or even 3 quarterbacks that could go ahead of CJ Stroud. That's not what I mean by. I just think the chatter of this idea that Stroud could just completely free fall out of the top 7.
I don't think he is.
I could get old takes exposed here, but I think I would find it highly unlikely that Stroud falls out of the top 5. Somebody will come get him because he's just the tape is really, really good. The ability is incredible.
Yeah, the ultimate resume was that Ohio State Georgia game. I mean, if you really, Georgia's got every one of those players on that field was like is either going to be drafted or is an All-American, and that kid lit them up, you know. And if you want to, just seriously watch the tape. I mean, I get it. S2 test, great, whatever. It's predictable or it helps you with this and that. I get it. It's part of the process. But if Nick Cesario and those guys down in Houston just pass because of that S2 test and Stroud goes on to shine like he did against Georgia, man, Nick Cesario is not going to be there anymore playing, being general manager if that's the case. And the new head coach might not be there either if they make decisions like that going forward.
So as we look at this draft as we head into this week, before we dive into Bleacher Report, their worst case scenarios for the Cowboys that we can come to, I'm curious, where do you think that there's usually 1 or 2 pivot points where it's like, hey, at this pick, depending what happens here, things might turn for the Cowboys. Like things could really go ugly. Like, man, this could be a domino that pushes them down. Or it could be, hey, if you get a player past this point, or if you get past, this section here and there's still X amount of corners on the board or whatever else, you should feel good about it. So is there a point in this draft where you look at and say, I really want to know what the board looks like when we come out of this section of teams or whatever, that once we clear there, I think we're going to have a better idea. Because like Steven said, you don't know what you're going to do until players start coming off the board. So where do you think we're going to start getting a sense of, all right, the Cowboys are going to be looking to move up or back? Is it going to be after the top 10? Are we going to have an idea of this once it gets closer to 20? What do you think that point is?
I kind of feel like that where the Cowboys need to focus on this draft now is at pick 18 with Detroit. I think you also have to look at, I think Detroit would be interested in moving. I think that would be a team that I would keep an eye on to try and add more picks. I would also keep an eye on John Snyder at Seattle at 20 is another team that would be, if you want to make just kind of a small, like I know it's a 6-spot move, but John Snyder is one of those guys that's always willing to kind of back up and get some more picks in a draft. But I think the 2 points are because what's happening is you got these teams. You got at 12, you've got Houston, 13 now Green Bay, 14 New England, and then the Jets on the clock at 15. Now those teams have all kind of switched. Well, Houston has been consistent now with Green Bay and the Jets switching spots. Now the players look different, and it's like, whoa, wait, Broadus, it's only 2 spots. Yeah, but they just put the Green Bay just got themselves in a position to maybe take the best receiver now instead of having to wait, and to maybe, you don't know what New England's going to do. I mean, New England might be looking to take some skill to try and help. I mean, they're talking about taking the damn running back. So if Houston doesn't take a receiver at 12, then you might be in a position to grab the first receiver and then go from that point on. But I'm going to focus on that draft at 18 and then also at 20 are the 2 spots that I'm kind of looking at. I would be interested if Jason Light would move at 19 to try and kind of retool his team. Because, you're kind of in that mode right now where, he's going to have to play, He's going to have to play. He's a little bit in no man's land because he might be inside his window with names still on his board in the first round. But if he backs up, he's probably thinking, well, maybe I'll get the same player if I back up in this draft. So you're right there in no man's land, really. And that's why I always say this: 18, 19, 20. Those are the three spots where the last player on a team's board in the first round could be there. And if not, you're just kind of backing out of there. And that's why I think teams back out in those spots, because they don't have a first round guy. They just don't. And that's why I think Seattle would be one of those teams that I would look at.
So as we pivot over now to some scenarios that could face the Cowboys at 26 that Bleacher Report says would be just worst case scenarios for Dallas for one reason or another. This was written by Alex Ballantyne. And here are their three. I'll kick you off with the first one, Brian, and you tell me if you feel like this would be a bad scenario, maybe not worst case, but if it'd be a bad one, or if you think it would be oversold as a worst case scenario. Number one would be taking Jahmyr Gibbs, the Alabama running back, at number 26. Is that a worst case scenario for you?
I don't know if it's a worst case scenario, Bobby, because he's the 16th best player on my board. I've got two running backs in the top 16, one at 3, one at 16. And it's not because of old school crusty. I just believe there's some value in these guys. I do believe it's important to be able to hand the ball off, to get tough yards, to be able to control games, to throw the football to these guys, to work screen games, to work them as wide receivers, whatever have you do to get them going. I don't think that's a worst case, and that wouldn't be for me. But I think there's people out there would say, oh, damn, it has to be with the position. Any other draft, any other era of drafting than what we've dealt with the last 2, 3, 4 years about running backs, these guys would absolutely go. These guys would be gone. It wouldn't be a question. They'd be gone at 6. They'd be gone at 12. Hell, I was part of a draft where like backs were going, John Gruden at Tampa. Cadillac Williams and
Ronnie Brown.
I mean, like in the top, the top 7 of a draft, so any other draft, I kind of feel like that this would be the case, but not this one. But I don't think that player fits a big time role for what you could do. Hand him the ball, run, let him be a runner, throw him the football, blitz pickup stuff. This is one of those guys that doesn't come off the field.
Yeah, and their biggest complaint with it, I guess, is just they say that they feel like there's too much overlap between Gibbs and Pollard as players. There's similar styles, and that there isn't any kind of play the thunder role to Tony Pollard's lightning. But even still, Gibbs is a talented player. My issues with Gibbs are going to be more about I thought on Pollard's tape you could see instances of him being able to run between the tackles. I don't know that I consistently see that with Jahmyr.
You're not, and that's a difference. In Bijan Robinson, I've had this discussion. Bijan Robinson makes 3 guys miss, and maybe Gibbs makes 1 miss. But I mean, but there's so many. When he's making people miss, he's finishing. He's getting up the field. He can get to the edge. He's explosive. He's tough enough. I don't. Like I said, I don't have a problem with Gibbs. I wouldn't consider – there are far worse situations that – okay, if you told me I was wiped out and I had to take Lucas Van Ness, then I would say, oh, that's a wipeout for me. But you know what? To teams, that might not be. This guy's a top 10 player. Everybody's talking about him top 10. I could be way, way, way wrong about him. And I'll wear it if I am. But I mean, I see a good player. I don't see a top 10 player. And if they took him at 26, I'd understand. But he's, I have him at 41 on my board. So I'd love McDonald from Iowa State before I would love Lucas Van Ness. That would be a wipeout situation for me.
Next worst case scenario, the second of 3 from Bleacher Report, passing on Michael Mayer if he's there. And Brian, I've already made it pretty clear. I think Michael Mayer is a really good player. To me, it's the same to me as saying a box safety is a really good player. or a mid-range shooter in the NBA is a really good player. They're good at what they do. They don't have flaws, but the way they're limited, I don't know if it translates to the modern NFL. And I think we did a study this morning on Sean and RJ, just looking at all the receivers or the tight ends over the last decade who have had 1,000-yard receiving season. The slowest 40 time was Rob Gronkowski at 4.68. The slowest 10-yard split of the group was Zach Ertz at 1.64. Michael Mayer had time slower than both of those. In fact, Michael Mayer's 10-yard split was the worst of any tight end at the combine. I don't see a guy that can stretch the seam, so I'm sure he'd be fine. He would not be a bust here. I don't feel like he's got a lot of bust potential. I just don't think there's a lot of room for growth and a lot of room to be that much different than Dalton Schultz. But would passing on Michael Mayer be a worst case scenario for you?
You know what? I feel like, Bill, he's the 18th best player on my board. And you know what? I just watched the tape and I understand numbers and 10-yard splits. And trust me, I spent my whole life dealing with combine numbers and pro day numbers and, quickness and all this. I think everybody does a great job that, studies these numbers and stuff like that. I just see a player that's super productive catching the football. I see a guy that when you run the ball behind him, you could see some blocks. He's a bigger guy. He's a soft-handed guy. He's good in the red zone. He's good on the crossing routes. I think there's things you could do with Michael Mayer that are better than, and maybe that's the warts. Maybe again, that's the warts that Jerry's talking about. Everything that you just mentioned, that he's not this, he's not that, he's not this, he's not that. Maybe that's the warts we're talking about for a player, and they're okay with that. But the more whispers you hear, and I said it on the radio today, if Michael Mayer's gone and that pushes Dalton Kincaid to them, I don't think they would have a problem taking Dalton Kincaid. I think they like Dalton Kincaid a lot. Oh, absolutely they do. So if Michael Mayer somehow ends up at the Commanders or someplace like that ahead of you on one of these, in their room, they're probably going to go, well, this opens up the opportunity. Now, okay, depending on it, Mayer's gone. There's the scenario I'm talking about. If all of a sudden Dalton Kincaid is coming down the board to you and one of these teams is looking to trade back ahead of you, knowing that you're going to grab Dalton Kincaid, then you got to be ready. You have to be ready for, okay, well, Giants just sold their pick. Who's going up for? They're going to get this guy. If it's Kincaid, you got to be ready on the board or on your board or your stack to have somebody if Dalton Kincaid was the guy you were holding on.
Really quickly before we go over the last scenario and then move on to the mailbag, you just made a mention of people say he isn't this, he isn't that, but he is this and this and this. For you, when you were scouting, or which do you think is more important? I understand both are part of the process, but which is more important to evaluate, do you think, what a player is or what he isn't?
I always think I think to me what it is. I hate when they kill these kids when it comes to, everybody's trying to say what's wrong with them. I try to be more of a positive guy about, the whole thing with the size, with these quarterbacks or these wide receivers. I'm not trying to be like, well, he's this, and he's that, and he's this, and he's that. I focus on when I watch that tape and I watch the guy catch a ball and people are bouncing off him and he finds a way to score a touchdown. That's kind of why, to me, when I watch this film, I'm like, but man, wait a minute, you're telling me all these numbers, but he's not doing anything. Or you're telling me let's be honest. And I don't think I'm wrong about this. I need to probably look it up before I say it. But I keep mentioning Lucas Van Ness. He bent 17 times, I think, in 225. I think I'm right about that.
I think
so now all of a sudden, are you telling me the guy, well, he plays strong? Well, he's not strong. He's not weight room strong,
17.
So yeah. So that's what I'm saying. There's wide receivers, defensive backs, running backs that bench more than this guy, strength than this guy. So you want to kill me. You want to kill me by saying, well, he can't do this, can't do. I try and focus on the most important. I have not brought up until now the Van Ness stuff because I'm like, I don't see a really powerful guy, but I try and focus on, like I say, hey, there are things when he gets and he finishes and does a good job with it, gets near the quarterback and stuff like that. But I tend to focus on the good side of things.
Just like 15, 20 seconds on this last one here.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No, you're good. I asked to follow up. Worst case scenario, the final one for them, they say taking Drew Sanders at 26. I honestly don't know that 2 and 3 passing on Mayer or taking Sanders at 26 would be things I would consider worst case scenarios. But for you, is there any scenario for you where taking Drew Sanders at 26 is the right pick?
Well, I've got him as my 28th best player, so I got him.
So
right
probably
there.
not. Yeah,
probably not. No problem. No.
That's a killer, Brian. All right, you are listening to the Love of the Star podcast. The Love of the Stars and Audacy podcast. You can find it on the Audacy app or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Brian, it is now time for our Dean Julia Love of the Star mailbag. It's where we turn things over to our dear, sweet listeners for their take and for their questions. Let them kind of control the conversation a little bit. First question here from Tim. If you eliminate guard, running back, and tight end all together at 26, what pick do you think is likely, and what pick do you think makes the most sense? So guard, no running back, tight end.
Defensive end. I mean, they're
specific name.
I think they'll look at the Iowa State kid,
Will McDonald. That's the name I thought of looking at the question.
I think if you get complete Todd Archer, I know that he and I were talking. Todd Archer of ESPN. Todd Archer and I were talking about a scenario where, again, the wiped out situation, and if you lost all your guys, if Wright and everybody was off the board, who would you take? And I'm thinking, I really do. I don't have a problem with Drew Sanders, but maybe they might take that defensive end McDonald before they take Drew Sanders.
Sure.
And so to me, I'm thinking that's got to be the route that they go.
If you eliminate all those options, I would think McDonald makes the most sense. Maybe if one of those corners gets pushed down to you at that point.
The next thing I was going to say would be a corner. Would you be willing to take Forbes? I mean, again, he plays at 100, probably 173, 174 pounds, but he's a damn good player. But to me, the fact that if they get stuck, I think they're going to lean on Dan Quinn. I think they're going to lean on Dan Quinn on that McDonald pick, because I know he went to Ames, Iowa, and was part of that. But he also went to Iowa City and did all those players too, all those defensive players as well.
All right, next question here from
good question, by the way.
Yeah, it is at Titanic Gambler asking, what player will shock people by going in the first round? What player will shock people by falling out of the first round? So obviously these are just kind of, guesses based off of maybe chatter or our own evaluation of how the league looks at things. But do you have any names that you think could surprise by going in the first round, or one that could surprise by falling, and one that could surprise by falling out?
I think the one that could fall out might be Miles Murphy is the one. I mean, you start
really all the way out.
I'm just saying, though, to me, it seems like, and I don't know, might be media scout driven. Mm-hmm. This might be, but you're starting to hear people talk about Miles Murphy coming down the board. And like I was saying, I'm basing that on, like I say, I haven't been like you. I mean, I know when they put this thing to bed, I'll have the opportunity to visit with some scouts and talk about kind of where some guys, maybe not Cowboy scouts, but scouts around the league where some of these guys might go. But I'd be interested to see, okay, well, how about one of these wide receivers then? We always mention Quentin Johnston. How about him falling out? How about Jordan Addison falling out? Do you see one of those wide receivers? Because I think that, I don't know if anybody has the same list of wide receivers. I don't. The top 3 or 4, it could be Hyatt could be in there. Johnston could be up in there. Smith and Jigba, I think, is the most consistent up there, but maybe somebody doesn't like Jordan Addison because he's 173 pounds. So I don't know. The receivers seem to me be very much kind of a shaky group when it comes to guys that might be hanging out in there, with that. a guy that I kind of feel like that might go up. I wonder if somebody, people are going to kill me because this is an LSU guy.
Ojulari.
Ojulari. Yeah.
Ojulari's really good. I think Ojulari should be a guy that goes in the first round.
See, that's what I'm saying. I've got Ojulari as my 29th best player, which puts him in the first round it puts him in the round one, but I have 20 players with first round grades. So could he go in the first round? Sure. But I kind of feel like that maybe he might go a lot higher than where I have him. Nolan Smith. I mean, if Dane's got Nolan Smith as the 11th best player on his board. So he's got Van Ness and Nolan Smith like back to back, 10 and 11. So, that's pretty strong work right there. Pretty strong work.
If you're talking about somebody who could surprise falling out, I still I'm not convinced. He very well could, and I know all the chatter for months has been that there's really not been anybody having him fall out of the first. But I'm going to need to see it to believe it, to see that teams are going to want to draft a 166-pound corner in the first round. I know.
I know you're right.
How you like him?
Yeah.
I just know the way this league has approached guys with like historic size issues that they've never seen before. They typically get a little scared of them. So I just could see Emmanuel Forbes sliding out of the first round. Not that he will, but I think he could. And then a guy who doesn't seem to be getting projected in the first round at all that I still think could slide in there and I think would be well worth it is Luke Musgrave, the tight end at Oregon State. Nope, has him going in the first, and I think he should be.
Yeah, see, Luke Musgrave I got at 31, and Dane has him at 29. So, I mean, he's right there on the cusp of that. I mean, if you look at 29, 30, 31, 32 for me, here are the names. Ojulari, Osiris Torrance, Luke Musgrave at 31, Emmanuel Forbes at 32, and then Kalijah Cansey at 33. That's kind of, Lance
Zerline from NFL.com has Musgrave 13th.
Yeah. 13th on his board.
On the board overall. Yeah.
I tell you,
that's sizable.
There's a couple. Like I said, I've got Van Ness like at 41, and Dane's got him at 10. I mean, I was just going through and seeing, okay, how different am I with Dane? And there's like he's really different.
How split are y'all on John Michael Schmitz? Because I know you like him, and Dane has him a little lower than most, I think.
Yeah, let me see where I got John Michael.
Because I think Dane had him in the 50s.
Yeah, I've got him at 51. Dane has him at 59. Oh, okay. Yeah. So
how about you had him higher than that?
Well, here's a big one. Keon White from Georgia Tech.
Oh yeah.
I've got him at 65. Dane has him at 48. So, that's a pretty big significant thing right there when you start to talk about, of guys. And let me give you one more. Tyreek Stevenson, corner from Miami. I've got him at 84. Dane has him at 69. So, I mean, that's a pretty significant split right there. The biggest one that he has, he absolutely doesn't want anything to do with Eli Ricks from Alabama. And I personally, like I said, where was it he had?
Forgetting ability just very briefly, there are a lot of off the field questions for Eli Ricks for teams.
Oh, I know. And that's the thing about it is I'm going to be way, way wrong about him where he gets drafted. But I think the guy's a hell of football. I'll give you a guy that Dane's a lot higher on than me when you're talking about corners is Cameron Mitchell from Northwestern. He's got him at 85 on his board. I have him at 135.
Whoa, that's a gap. That's a
huge gap. Huge gap right there. So,
all right. Two more quick questions here. We'll try and fit in. This one from.
I'm sorry. I'm just going on about.
No. You're good. You're good. We're good. First question here from Mario. Which prospect at 26 would make you say, whoa, didn't see that one coming? Obviously within reason. And then which one would you say, okay, that one was kind of telegraphed? For me, the telegraphed one would be Michael Mayer. For the one I didn't see coming, a guy that could maybe be in their range who I think would be a good player and make sense there. I just haven't heard any chatter about him, but a Brian Branch would make me go, wow, I didn't see that coming.
Yeah, I was gonna throw. It's funny you mentioned Branch, but when the Cowboys actually do something like that, I kind of feel like you're right about. I think you're right about the tight end. I think you're absolutely right about that. I'm kind of looking and seeing one that I didn't see. Okay. How about this one? What if they pick Jalen Hyatt at 26? Something like that.
That'd be pretty surprising.
Because people have talked about. I mean, I kind of feel like though, would they have Jalen Hyatt? Or maybe they have their board Smith and Jigba, Hyatt, and then the other receivers that we've been talking about, Quentin Johnston and stuff like that. He might. That one would be one of those ones that I would be surprised, but he's kind of in that range where I think that they would maybe consider picking him.
And then last question here, and we'll do this again one more time on Wednesday. We'll record, so we'll have one for you on draft day. But we'll ask the question now. We'll see if it changes come Wednesday when we record. Our buddy Chase, our Oxnard buddy, is asking the pick is who's your projection right now?
Oh, damn! Why? I'm going to say that Mayer is going to go. I'm going to say that Mayer is going to go, and I'm going to say that they're going to pick. I want to pick our guy from Utah. I really do want to pick Kincaid there, because let me ask you this real quick, real quick.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think Bijan Robinson's gone?
Yes.
Okay. I think if Bijan Robinson's on the board, they take him at 26.
Yes.
If he's not there, I think Mayer's gone. I think Dalton Kincaid will be the pick at 26 if he's there.
And I will also go a tight end as of today. May change by Wednesday when we record next, but I'm going to say Mayer. I think right now Mayer is the one that seems to be the most buzzy name that they have. But look, this is also I think that this is an instance where there are a couple different names that could go there at 26 and be in play. You just don't know how the board's going to fall, and we don't have a clear idea yet on maybe how the Cowboys feel about some certain guys. But other names to consider there as of right now.
Yeah.
Will McDonald, Steve Avila.
That's what I was going to ask you. I was going to ask you where, if it came down to Kincaid or McDonald, who do you think they would take?
Kincaid, probably.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Just because I think they may like McDonald more. I don't know, but I think that they would look at it as we got to get some help on this side of the ball.
Yep, I agree.
And so, all right, that does it for us. We will talk to you guys again on Thursday when it will officially be draft day. It is Christmas time. We're all excited. Until next time, we'll talk to you guys later. Hey, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more content like this. If you want to see more of our videos, be sure to check out our playlist and let us know what you think in the comments below. Also, don't forget to follow us on social media to stay up to date on our latest updates. Links are in the description. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.